Hey guys, it's Kevin with my review for the first season of the new Apple TV Plus show, Home Before Dark. So, what Home Before Dark is essentially about is we center on the character of Hildy Lisco, who actually is based off a real person. I think it's very loosely though. But basically, she is a young girl that used to live in Brooklyn, and basically she has recently moved to this small lakeside town that her father used to stay in. And once they get there, there are tons of secrets that really do haunt him. There's a lot of things that he has kept from them, and Hildy is someone that her father used to be a reporter, and she very much is starting to follow in his footsteps. And so when an event takes place after this recent murder of sorts, Hildy takes the time where she really wants to dive deeper into what's going on here and maybe finally solve some cases that have long since been forgotten and get to the bottom of things, and also hopefully try to get her dad to come to terms with what happened. And that's really all I'm going to say. So Home Before Dark overall, I was really looking forward to this show. Look, when it comes to Apple TV Plus, you guys will notice I haven't watched a lot, and it's not necessarily because I haven't had any interest. It's just simply that there have been other things that have come out, and I just haven't felt the motivation to watch these Apple TV Plus shows. There's so many of them. Not many of them have been all that well reviewed. Like, I was going to watch the one with Aaron Paul, but I heard that one turned out to be terrible, and so I just didn't get to that one. Servant is the one that I think I'm definitely going to get to soon. I've actually heard really good things about that one. But like The Morning Show, for example, that's a show I was really set on reviewing, but I watched one episode and it did absolutely nothing for me. So I didn't really feel that much motivation to finish it out. But this is one where I really wanted to commit to it. I've really liked what I've seen of Brooklyn Prince. I felt like this was a really interesting concept, and I was really hoping that this could be something really good. I tried to, and I especially thought, I have the time. There's really no excuse for me to say that I couldn't get to this show. So I think I'm going to finally try to finish an Apple TV Plus show, and I did. And to be honest, I can understand why there aren't many people talking about this show, because it's really not going to do all that much. Home Before Dark is a show that I think has some really good ideas, but overall just feels very generic and underwritten, and just at the end of the day, just did not do what I think it needed to really be successful and to really stand out in that way. But there are definitely some things that are really strong, and we're just getting to right now. So I will say right now, the one thing I think that does definitely elevate this show, and the thing that does make it overall watchable and not such a bore fest in that way, are actually the performances. I think most of the performances are really strong in this show. I think mostly everyone does a really strong job. But absolutely, the thing that carries this entire show is its lead performance from Brooklyn Prince as a character of Hildy Lisco, who just continues to blow me away as she goes forward into her career. She's kind of similar to Raffi Cassidy in that way, where the material that she's choosing isn't that great. It's not really utilizing her that well, but she is always good. She's always a huge standout, and that's very much the case when it comes to this show. She's very likable as this character, and Hildy is someone who makes a lot of questionable decisions, but because Prince is really giving it her all in this performance and really trying to do everything she can to make this character memorable, to really get you to care about this character, I just thought she did a really great job with that. She shows the dedication that Hildy has, how much she cares about this, how important it is for her to like become a reporter and things like that, but also I think paying the respect that was needed to the real Hildy, I thought was definitely really well done. She definitely has some really great scenes here for sure, and I'll get into her character a little bit later, but I thought overall she definitely did do a really great job here. She really commands the entire screen whenever she's on, and I think she just does a really great job as the lead character here. I think the show is worth watching alone just for Prince's performance. Again, there aren't a lot of things to recommend about this show, but this is the one thing where I'm like, yeah, definitely Prince's performance is enough a reason to check this out. As well as Jim Sturgess. He's the other really big standout, I think, in the show as her father, and Honestly, it may just be his best performance yet, because Sturgess has always been a very on and off actor for me. I feel like he either is really good or he's like really overdoing it. And here, I thought he had the perfect blend. You know, this is a guy that, yeah, he can be kind of aloof. He can definitely be very, very much of a downer in that way and things like that, and very mopey, but you really do feel the bond between these two, and I think that's what works so well about Sturgis' performance, is that you really do feel his love for his daughter in that way, and you feel the bond between these two. The show, I think, is really at its best when we get to see these two interacting together, because out of all the characters, they're the ones that understand each other the most, and they have such a, close bond in that way. And so I think they did a really good job with that throughout this first season. The way they dive into that relationship, though they didn't do as much as I wanted to there, whenever it was the two of them together, I thought it was definitely some of the best scenes of the entire show. I love what we got to see of both of them. And again, I think just the reason why I want to come back to the show is just to see more of these two characters bonding, because I thought that there was just something really special, really sweet, and really I thought brought out the best in both of them overall. Definitely, both of them are fantastic here. And Sturgis, again, just really impressing me in this role. As far as the rest of the cast goes, I'm a bit 50-50 with some of them. I think some of the performances are really strong here, and some of them I just wasn't a big fan of. I will say actors like Michael Weston, for example, who's playing the character of Frank Briggs Jr., I thought did a really good job, actually. I definitely really liked him in this role. He's trying to be as good of a cop as he can, but he also is constantly tempted by his father, played by Louis Herthum, who I honestly wasn't a big fan of, which surprised me because I liked him a lot in Westworld, and I thought he was a really good actor, but here, I just thought he was really overdoing it. Abby Miller was very on and off for me. There were points where I thought she was really good as Bridget. Hildy's mother, and I thought that she was making a lot of really great points, but then there were times where she just came off annoying in that way, because they don't really have a lot for this character to do. She really only consists of two things, and I'll get a little more into that with the writing, but again, I felt like the show just did not let Miller utilize her full talents, and she's a really good actress. I've seen her in many things before, and she's done a really solid job. It's just here, I just thought that she was just kind of on and off for me. I think, again, there were points where she was working, and there were points where she really wasn't. Someone that was a big standout for me, though, was Aziza Scott as the character of Trip. I liked her a lot. I thought that she was a lot of fun in the show. I liked the dynamic she had with Hildy. The bond that they kind of have, I thought was kind of sweet. And despite the fact that I thought her character was very underwritten, I think Scott does what she can to, again, make this character kind of stand out in that way. Hildy's two friends, Jibrail, Nantambu, and Deric McCabe, I will say right now, Deric McCabe is way better here than he was in A Wrinkle in Time. This is not nearly as terrible as that, but still nothing really that great. Prince is, for the most part, acting circles around them in pretty much every single scene, and so sometimes it just comes across kind of awkward because they're just not on the level of her, and you really do feel that in their scenes. And again, I didn't think they were bad necessarily. I felt like they could have gotten better child actors to really balance how, Prince's talents in that way, because they're just not on that level at all. And so sometimes it can be a little hard to watch. Joelle Carter, I thought, was pretty good for what she had, but there was one performance in the show that I just thought was really bad and just was not working for me at all. And unfortunately, it's from an actress that I've actually liked before, and that's Kylie Rogers as her sister Izzy. I thought was honestly pretty terrible here, and it's not because she's like overacting. If anything, she's underacting. She seemed incredibly bored and emotionless almost throughout this entire show, and I get it, she's supposed to be the sister that's a bit irritated by what Hildy's doing, and so she's trying to be more normal in that way, but it just came across like she did not want to be here. It very much felt that way to me, and I didn't feel a single emotion from her at all in the show. And anytime she came on, it took me out of it almost immediately. I was just not really a fan of her at all, whether it was her disinterest in her family, or even scenes of her with this guy that she eventually starts a relationship with. Nothing about it felt genuine. Nothing about it felt like she was really into it. It all just really felt like Rogers was half-assing it, which is weird to me because I saw her in the show The Whispers a couple years ago, and I thought she was great in that. I thought she did a really good job as this really creepy kid, and maybe it's because in that show she had to kind of be emotionless in that way because it made her creepy. Here, on the other hand, it really is not working at all. It comes across as honestly kind of hard to watch at points, and I just thought she was really bad. But overall, like I said, cast is very 50-50. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because this is unfortunately where we get to the things that just don't really work at all for me in this show, unfortunately. And look, again, there were things that I was really liking about the show. I'm gonna keep reiterating this probably throughout this, is that for a while I was really liking this show. I liked the tone that Dana Fox and Dara Resnik set up. It was very fun. It was trying to be something a little bit less serious than most of these kind of, murder mysteries that you see, or mystery shows that you see on TV. And I definitely really did appreciate that, and I thought that it was very fun. But then, as the show went on, I started to realize this show does not really have a very balanced tone. It seems a bit confused with who it's trying to appeal to. And I think the big reason for that is because Fox and Resnik just don't have any style of their own. A lot of it feels like they're trying to copy off of other shows, because there are points in this show when Hildy's with her friends, especially, that literally feels like something I'd see in Stranger Things. It feels like a less serious and less impressive version of Stranger Things at points. It really does feel that way. And I don't know if it's just because that, or if also because, they're riding on bikes and things like that, similar to how Mike, Dustin, and Lucas were. It feels very similar to what we've seen in Stranger Things. And then there are points where the show feels like a basic cable show on like CBS or something, which you guys know I can't stand. And that, I think, is really the biggest problem with this show, is that it is waffling constantly. When it's centered on Hildy, it's very fun, it's very whimsical, it has a feel to it that kids are going to really appreciate. But then when it tries to center on the adult characters, suddenly it's a lot more melodramatic, it's a lot more serious, and it's just hard to really stay focused. I ended up half watching a lot of this show because of the fact that it just isn't a show that I think is that well balanced. There's not a lot about it that is telling you, like, you need to watch this. The style is just not really there, and it's unfortunate because, again, I think that Fox and Resnik, they had something good here for a while, but to me, it just really felt like they didn't know what they wanted this show to fully be. They didn't know how they wanted this show to be structured, and I think if there's anything they need to fix in season 2 is figure out, what is this trying to be? Are we trying to make this a fun, sort of whimsical type show, or are we taking this a little bit more seriously? Because the show, even towards the end, does not really know that, and I think that's really one of the biggest disservices to this entire show, is just, again, the style is just not there, and I just felt the directing was very off throughout this entire show. But unfortunately, the writing does not do it many favors at all. Look, again, there are things that I did like about this show initially. I actually really did like our main character at first. I think the show did a good job in showing how eccentric and how different she was from everyone else. The fact that she is this precocious kid that's obsessed with, like, all the president's men and things like that, to the point where, like, she watches the speech, like, religiously. There's no other film she wants to watch. I think that's a lot of fun. And her wanting to investigate this, because her father isn't, and because he is very traumatized, clearly, by what's happened. He's very haunted by it, and so it's caused him to not want to be a reporter anymore. He's kind of put that off, and so she's trying to kind of pick up where he left off in that way. I think is a good idea. But there comes a point about halfway through the season where I just kind of realized they're not really gonna develop her any more than that. And I'm sorry, but that's just not really enough for me. The character of Hildy is one I did enjoy, but because of the fact that the show focuses so much on just her trying to solve this mystery, I felt it honestly was kind of a disservice to her character because it took away us really getting to know her. There's not a lot that we know about Hildy beyond her wanting to be a reporter. There's not that much else. Like, what else is she going through? What are her struggles? I really wanted some kind of an arc for her, and it's just not there this season. She starts off as this genius detective, and she ends as a genius reporter. Like, there really isn't any sort of foundation there, and again, I know it's only the first season, and I know it's called a character arc, and sometimes that can take a while, but the show does not present a lot for me to really get that invested in. Honestly, if Brooklyn Prince was not playing this character, I really don't know if I'd be that interested in Hildy as a character, because at points, she can honestly be kind of annoying. There are so many points where she puts herself in harm's way, and it just doesn't really work. You know this wouldn't actually happen, and yet it still does happen, and it just doesn't really work in that way. So I think that's definitely a problem, and that's something that definitely did take me out of it. But again, there are things I do like about this show as well when it comes to Hildy. Like I said, I like her relationship with her father. I like the relation that her and Matt have. The fact that these two really do understand each other. He's the only one who understands why she wants to be a reporter, why this is something that he should let her do. And yeah, sometimes he doesn't always make the best decisions, but again, you understand the bond that they really do have as father and daughter. And I thought that that bond, again, was really strong in that way. That was the main thing that really was, again, keeping me into this show. But the problem is, none of the things that I wanted them to focus on is what they focus on here. And like I said, there are many points where I felt like I was watching less of a show that was like prestige television on a streaming service and more like some random cop show I'd see on like CBS or something. And you guys know I fucking hate that shit. And the main reason is because of what I'm about to say, because I feel that focusing on just the mystery is not very compelling television. The mystery itself is compelling at first. I do think it is compelling at first, and there are some things that I did really like, but at least for me, it is not enough to fill up an entire 10 episode season. I just don't think the mystery itself is interesting enough for that. It gets very repetitive after a while. It feels like we're kind of just going through the same information every single episode, doing the same things every single episode, and after a while, it just starts to get monotonous. A very good example of this is Matt's subplot with his wife, with the character of Bridget, who, like I said, at first I did like her. Again, like I also said, the show restricts her to really only do about 2 or 3 things in the show. Either she's the concerned mother who's trying to help out her daughters, she is this attorney of sorts that's trying to bail this character Sam out of jail because she's trying to deflect, she's trying to do what she can to exonerate him of what he did, because everyone feels that he is the prime suspect in this Richie Fife case of sorts that has haunted the family and things like that, and so she's trying to do what she can to try to help him out. Or she is the nagging wife that is constantly on Matt's character, and I get it. I get why she's concerned, because again, there's a lot of trauma that Matt went through, and he's not opening up to her in the way that he should. He's being very closed off, and I get it that she's annoyed. But after like the 4th or 5th scene of it happening, it's like, just get to the point already. I'm so tired of her just being like, trying to get it out of him. It's like, just give her literally anything else to do, and this could be a really interesting character, but they don't do that. And It's just so annoying. It's so annoying that the show doesn't want to utilize these characters in the right way. Again, Hildy as a character, again, I do think her and Nat, they are mostly well utilized, despite the fact that, again, I don't think the show does enough with her, but at least the show is centered on her. There's many other characters in this show that I just don't really feel got what they needed to. The character of Trip, for example, is a character I really liked a lot. I liked her bonding with Hildy. I like the dynamic that those two had. I think that she could have been a really fun character, but her storyline only gets interesting really at like the penultimate episode of the season, and it's just not enough. It's not enough time, and I think that's the biggest issue with the show, is that because they're so focused on this mystery, which again is not necessarily a bad one. I do think that the mystery is interesting, but that's all they really seem to focus on. There's not enough interpersonal sort of character drama that's going on to really keep me all that invested in the show. And I think that's the main thing that did take me out of it. There's also just way too many characters here, like I said. And like I said, the Richie Fife mystery itself can definitely be very interesting, but again, it very often feels like that's all the show has to offer. And to really understand what I'm trying to say, let's take a look at something like, say, Stranger Things, for example. I hate to compare the two. I don't like to compare things just because they're similar, but something like Stranger Things does a really good job of, yes, we did have the whole disappearance of Will Bowers, and that was the main, sort of driving force of the story. That was definitely the main thing that had those stakes in the story. But we also cared about the characters because there was a lot of interpersonal drama going on there. We got a lot more into them. Home Before Dark, that's not really the case, especially when it comes to Hildy's two friends. There's nothing to them. They're with her. They accompany her on missions. They will often assist her in things, but we don't really know much about them. We don't really get to know Spoon or Donnie in the show. And so, again, while, like I said, I don't really think that they're that great in the show, I feel like they could have been. I also feel like the show just didn't utilize them that well. It's more just like they're just the goofy little sidekicks, and that's just not enough for me. I need more than just that. And this show did not give that to me. I didn't get those complex characters that I really wanted. The show was just simply too basic for my liking. Enjoyable and watchable for sure. I wouldn't say this is like a terrible show. There's definitely a lot of things about that are pretty watchable. But at the same time, I think the show can get very dull. And there were points where I was definitely getting kind of bored in what was going on because there just isn't a whole lot that it has to offer. And I think that's really its biggest detriment out of everything when it comes to this show. And then, of course, for all the things that the show does wrong, I don't think any of them are worse than the character of Izzy, who, Kylie Rogers' performance aside, is a horrible character on her own, mainly because she's really just a walking cliche. There really is nothing about Izzy in this show that makes me feel like she needs to be here. I kept watching this season and being like, what is the point of this character other than we just have someone to cut back to every so often? Her plotline in the show almost feels like something I'd see on like a bad show on the CW or something. It really does feel that way. She's she's the angsty teenage daughter, and she is, the older sister, and so she's a little bit wiser, and she's annoyed at Hildy, and she's trying to, be normal and things like that. She's trying to stay out of the drama. She has this relationship going on with this guy that I don't give a fuck about, and she's like mad at him for no reason, and there's nothing interesting going on with her. There is one episode where I liked her, one episode where I'm like, okay, we're finally gonna get something good, and then they just drop it. They don't do anything interesting with this character. I just kept wondering what was the point of her, and I just found her to be really boring as a character, and it just was not working for me at all, I have to say. So again, you would really think I hate this show from what I'm saying, but I really don't hate this show. There are quite a few things I do like about it. As I said, I think that there is actually some generally good writing in there. The case itself of what happened to Matt and how this has affected him, Richie Fife's, possibly, Richie Fife's, disappearance and his murder and things like that, I think is a generally really good idea. The way that they kind of flash back to everything and how this has had an effect on Matt in the present, I actually do like that idea. I think it does work. It shows why he is where he is today. And I think that's something that is really well done in this show, and I definitely did enjoy that for the most part. But again, I just feel they're a little too focused on that. There's also a side mystery going on as well in like the first 3 episodes that they solve like immediately, and it's like, what was the point of this? Like, why do you even need this to happen in order to get to this case? I feel like we could have just had the Richie Fife case. There's a whole separate case going on with this woman Penny Gillis that like Hildy runs into, and I didn't feel it had any relevance in this season. I kind of just felt like you could have just picked one. Like, it almost felt like they had 2 different ideas. They didn't want to they didn't want to choose, so they just did both of them, and it just feels clunky. It really does feel clunky in that way, and that's very annoying to say the least. But like I said, it's the relation between her and Matt. That's what really keeps you into this show. And so I don't think it's any coincidence that my favorite episode of this season, in fact, is really just about the two of them. It's them going on like this day trip of sorts and really trying to get to the bottom of the case. And you see a lot more of their overall relationship. We get to dive into it a little bit more. We get more of an idea of what's really gotten them to this point. And I was like, okay, this is great. I really was actually feeling good about this show towards the end. I felt like it was finally getting to a point that I could say, okay, the show definitely did pay off in the end. I really did feel like it was getting somewhere great. And then, well, I'll get to that in a little bit. But again, the writing here is just not really that great. It's very generic. It at times is very melodramatic as well. And just, it's not very well written. And I think that's really the biggest issue with the show, is that it's just way too basic of television for my liking. I'm not saying that it's bad television, but just for me personally, it's just way too basic. And I think there was just so much more that they could have done that really could have made this a better season overall. Cinematography is really nothing special. There's some good shots here and there, but nothing really that sticks out all that much to me, to be honest. And the score, I actually did like. I actually did like the score to this show, though I will say at points it does feel a bit foreboding. Like they're kind of just using it to get more emotion at you, get you more invested into the story, and I feel like they could have done a little bit better of a job with that. But for the most part, I did enjoy the score in the show. But the editing's my other biggest issue, is that I feel like a lot of these episodes are actually way too short. A lot of these episodes only run for like 43 minutes, and I don't really understand why, because I feel like there's so much more they could have done in some of these episodes. But then on the other hand, the ones that are long, I feel like some of them are too long. Episode 6, for example, is almost an hour long, and I really have no idea why. It goes on almost forever. It's one of my least favorite episodes of this season. It's not the worst episode of the season. I'll get more into that in a little bit. But I just feel that that was not very well handled. I feel like that the pacing could have been a lot better for sure. There's a lot of scenes that either they drag on or they don't do enough with, and that was definitely disappointing overall. And I think they could have done more there. And like I said before, again, there were a lot of things that were working in this show for me towards the end. I really was feeling good about it. And then we get to the finale, and oh my god, the finale just does not inspire confidence, I have to say. If they're going where I think they're going, I'm really not that excited for season 2. And I know season 2 is going to happen, and maybe it'll be better. I hope it's better. But considering where they left off, I am not that excited for it because I think it's a really stupid idea. But either way, we're just going to get into spoilers right now so I can really get into what really did kind of annoy me about the show overall. So I'm not going to go through a bunch of things here because really I would be here for a while if I were to do that, because there is a lot that happens in the show. Not a lot that I really want to talk about because a lot of it doesn't really interest me that much. But I'm going to talk about the things that I think just really brought this finale especially down. The finale for me was the worst episode of the season easily. Not just because of what happens at the end, but because nothing about it felt satisfying. I didn't leave this finale feeling like, okay, they closed things off on a good note. They wrapped that up pretty well. Everything felt either rushed or it felt like it just was kind of shoehorned in. Trip winning, for example, Trip winning for mayor, I think is a really good idea. I do really like that because it gives her a lot more to do in the next season. Whereas I feel like this season they didn't really know what to do with her, other than she's the adult friend to Hildy that that has a fun relationship with. There's that. And I do, but the problem is, Hildy wanting her to run for mayor, I think just happened way too late into the season. If they would have introduced that earlier, this would have been a way more satisfying outcome. But because I didn't really care that much, I just didn't really feel much when that ended up happening. I kind of just felt like, okay, that was kind of obvious. I felt like, Trip was always going to win in that way. So that didn't really I didn't really feel all that much at the end, unfortunately. And again, I feel like they could have handled that better, but it just didn't really pan out that way, I have to say. And I think that's kind of what brought that whole scene down. But the stuff I did really like, actually, was what they did with Matt's father. That was great. I actually really love that story with him having this dementia and things like that, and him it kind of worsening throughout the season. And we harken back to a time when Matt left for college, and that was like the last time he saw his father. And now his father thinks that he's that age again. I thought that was a really effective scene, but it would have been more effective if they would have actually killed him off. I really do feel they should have just killed this character off because they didn't do anything with him after that. Once he's fine in the hospital, they don't really go back to it. I did, again, I really like the scene where Hildy was like, dancing with her grandfather and things like that. I thought that was really effective. And again, it's a really good way of showing dementia, but it's another one of those things where it didn't get enough time. It didn't get enough time for me to really invest in that story, just again, because there's so much going on in this show, and there's only so many things I care about. Like, for example, Frank Jr. running against his father. I didn't really care about that because I didn't really feel like we had enough time to invest in that storyline. I liked Michael Weston in the role, but Frank Sr. was just such a caricature for me in that way. He didn't really feel like a fully fleshed out character. He just kind of felt like the demanding sheriff. Like that's what he felt like to me, and I didn't really feel like he was that well fleshed out overall. But then we get to the very end of the finale, and oh my god, this pissed me off so much because we think finally we've gotten to a point where, we've solved the Richie Fife murder. We understand what went down, that Kim's mom was trying to like protect him and things like that, and he was trying to, he ended up he ended up being shot by this guy, and it seemed like it was pretty much all wrapped up. But then, when they finally, seems like they finished off the case, they find the car is actually still in the river, and basically we're left to believing that somehow Richie actually survived this entire time. So essentially what that means is this entire mystery this season was for nothing. That really pissed me off for sure. And look, it's not just because of the fact that it's the same thing again next season, that it's still the Richie Fife case, which I don't like at all. I'm a firm believer that you can drag out mysteries, but they should be mysteries that are relevant still. They should be mysteries that tie in, that are satisfying, and this is not going in a satisfying direction. They've dragged this out long enough. And also, my bigger problem is that it just doesn't make any logical sense. I mean, look, I get it. Richie lived in an abusive household, and he was clearly trying to get away from them. But why would he stage this happening? Why would he get away? You know, how did he get away? He was only 11 years old. It's very hard to believe that this could actually happen. I just feel it's a bit implausible, and it just doesn't really work for me overall. And the ending shot with Hildy and Nat and them trying to gather more information, I like the fact that they're working together now. I do like that, but I just didn't really care because I feel like it's gonna be a retread now. It's gonna be going through that same information of like the same thing that happened, and it's just annoying. I'm not into that idea at all. I feel like we've moved past that already, and I just feel like this would have been the perfect time for the show to just move into something else. End the season with her like ended like Jessica Jones, where she's getting like calls on the phone or something. Like do something like that. Don't have the same mystery going on. It's unnecessarily dragging things out. You already had 10 episodes. It kind of makes me feel like you didn't have enough, honestly. And yeah, I really was very let down by the way it ended. And like I said, I was actually liking the show up to that point. I thought there was a bit of a lull in the second half, but the last 3 episodes I thought were actually kind of good. So I was like, okay, this is going to go somewhere. And then that happened, and that really just confirmed just how this show wasn't doing what I wanted to do, unfortunately. And that's what's so disappointing about it, I think. So yeah, overall, Home Before Dark is a show that I think had a lot of opportunities to be good. It's got a really great performance from Brooklyn Prince and Jim Sturgess. I think those two work very well together. I think there are some good concepts in there. I think that the central mystery is interesting, but the show is focused way too much on procedural elements and not enough on the characters. And there's also just way too many characters in this show. There's way too many things going on. There's so many characters the show doesn't seem to know what to do with. The tone is just not very well established. There's a lot of things that just get very repetitive after a while. But most of all, it really just feels like a show that isn't really doing anything that special. And to be honest, I think this is probably the main reason why Apple TV Plus is just not really being taken all that seriously. If they really want to thrive as a network and they really want to go somewhere great, they need to start producing better shows than this. They need to start distributing better stuff, because this could honestly be a show like on CBS. Like I said, I could easily see this being a show on like basic cable, and that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. You gotta be more innovative than that. You gotta be more creative. It's a very broad landscape. Streaming services. It's a very crazy competition right now, and this is just not at all. This is not acceptable. This is not at all acceptable. I need something a lot better than this. And again, maybe season 2 will deliver more, but just everything that I wanted the show to be, it just wasn't. It can definitely be very enjoyable. Hildy is definitely a very likable character. I like the relation between her and her father, but really, other than that, there just wasn't really a lot that the show did for me at the end of the day. I very often found myself checking out of the show. I think there definitely are some things it does do well, but at the end of the day, it's a show that I think I'm very quickly going to forget. So unfortunately, I am going to give the first season of Home Before Dark overall a C+. But over, guys, in my review, the first season of Home Before Dark, and the most you guys saw the season overall, left your thoughts in it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.